Fun fact, a bunch of Retina MacBooks from 2016 on shipped with non-200% scaling as default, using the same kind of downscaling as it does when you set a 4K monitor to 1440p. For example, my 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro has 1440 by 900, or actually 2880 by 1800, as the default resolution, when the screen's resolution is 2560 by 1600. I'd wager 90% of the people who own one of these either don't even know about it, or they do know, but they're perfectly fine with it. To be clear, there are people who absolutely do care, and that's why Apple upped their pixel density on their 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros from 2021 on. But those are the kinds of people who would probably never buy a 4K monitor. So, if it's not a big deal on these Macs, why would it matter on a 4K monitor? Well, there are three potential reasons that I can think of. First reason is the most simple one. On a 4K monitor, when you select 1440p, it tells you that using a scaled resolution may impact performance. This is just because it's running at 5K internally, which is 14 million pixels. That's obviously a very large resolution, higher than any resolution you can scale on a MacBook. I mentioned this in the last video, but if you ever need maximum graphical performance, you can easily switch resolutions to a lower one. The second reason is that the MacBooks have a higher pixel density than any 4K monitor above 20 inches. It's 220 ppi versus about 163 for a 27-inch monitor, or about 138 for a 32-inch one. Essentially, the MacBook screens are Retina. That means that even with good eyesight, you won't be able to discern individual pixels at a reasonable distance. If you can't discern individual pixels, artifacting or blurry text won't be nearly as noticeable. And for some people, it won't be noticeable at all. But hear me out here, and feel free to disagree. You can make a serious case that 4K monitors, even at 32 inches, are Retina. Why? Well, let's take a look at my definition. All that Retina means is that you can't discern individual pixels at a reasonable distance. Keyword, reasonable. Originally, on the iPhone, Retina was a pixel density of about 330 ppi. For Apple's laptops, they decided on 220 ppi, which is way less than on their phones. However, most people still can't discern individual pixels because they're typically using their laptops further from their face than phones. But my argument is that people use their desktop displays further from their face than their laptops. So back when I first got my 4K monitor, I had a really small desk. So I put it on the edge of the desk, and whenever I looked at the monitor, I was sitting way too close to it. So when I set it to 1440p, I noticed like all of the artifacting. What fixed it for me, what made me realize that 4K screens are perfectly fine, is when I got a bigger desk. I moved it back a little bit, and suddenly, I didn't notice any artifacting, even at scaled 1440p. So I found this website here that tells you the distance you need to be from a screen for you to not notice the pixels. Put in a 27-inch 4K screen and you get a distance of 21 inches. Put in a 32-inch 4K screen and you get like 25 inches. Those are like entirely reasonable distances to use a desktop monitor. Also, a bit of an aside, the screen size you choose to get doesn't matter nearly as much as you'd think. A 27-inch screen 21 inches away from your face will look the same as a 32-inch screen 25 inches away. The ratios of the screen size to the distance away are the same. Now, our eyes are great at depth perception, so you'll still be able to tell that a 32-inch screen is bigger. But that doesn't matter too much if you don't have them next to each other, or at least on the same desk. Now, if you have a small desk like I used to, you can't really adjust the distance as much as you would be able to if you have a large desk, so you definitely need to be more careful what size you get. But if you have a large desk, you have all the flexibility in the world. Back to why downscaling might matter more on a 4K monitor. The third reason is a bit more complicated. When you downscale an image, it performs a calculation to determine what colors each pixel will be based on the positions and colors of the pixels in the original image. There are different types of downscaling algorithms and filters, including nearest neighbor, bilinear, bicubic, and Lanczos. macOS's downscaling algorithm looks the most similar to Lanczos, but no matter what algorithm you use, the closer the original image lines up to the final image, the better the final image will look. This can be determined by the ratio of the vertical or horizontal resolution you're scaling from to the one you're scaling to. The closer that number is to 1, the better it'll look. For 1440p scaling, that's 2880 divided by 2160, so 1.333. Take the default on my laptop. That'd be 1800 divided by 1600, so 1.125. That's a lot closer to 1. To adjust this, you can use Better Display. Now, Better Display is a great tool, but it's a common misconception that it changes the way macOS is scaled. All that it actually does is give you more options for what resolution you can scale your Mac to. As Wade Aber, the developer of Better Display, says, it still uses bitmap scaling, does not convert the desktop to be vector-based, like how Windows does it. But if you set it up, it can allow for more downscaled options. If you don't want to deal with the hassle of that, fun fact, native macOS has hidden extra options too. Go to Displays on System Settings, right-click the resolution options, and press Show List. These options here are also downscaled from higher resolutions, and these two are closer to that 1.125 ratio from my laptop. But if you still feel like it may be an issue for you, you don't have to use any kind of downscaling. That means setting it to 1920 by 1080 or 3840 by 2160, because these both render at 4K. In the last video, I basically glossed over these options, but they're still useful for a lot of people. The one labeled 3840 by 2160 is the native 100% scale for a 4K monitor. These days, macOS isn't built for 100% scaling anymore. You can especially tell when it comes to text rendering and certain icons. I mean, look at this spotlight icon. That's why I'd recommend being cautious about buying 1440p or 1080p monitors, because those essentially are stuck on 100% scaling. On 4K, it can also make everything look really small, but if you have a large enough screen and move it closer to your face, it works well. And look at how massive of a space you have to work with. Now, if we look at 1080p, it was actually the default on my monitor when I first plugged it in. I don't know if that's the case for every monitor, but it was the case for mine. And it makes everything look super sharp. For most people, the UI size is just fine. It appears like 1080p, and many people are more than fine with using a 1080p display. However, a lot of people come from a 1440p monitor, or got a new external monitor explicitly to get a larger UI space. I recommend 1440p high DPI because I think it represents the perfect sweet spot between sharpness and UI size for most people. But if you're the right person for one of these options, there's no reason not to use it. Since there's no downscaling, these both give you maximum performance while using the full resolution of your screen. The great thing is that you can change the scale whenever you want based on whatever you're doing, and Better Display makes it even easier to do that. Finally, let's talk about Windows. Yes, if you've heard that Windows supports 4K monitors better than macOS, you've heard correctly. Essentially, while macOS offers 100%, 200%, and a bunch of downscaled 200% resolutions to simulate percentages in between, Windows can just flat out scale to options between 100% and 200%. So instead of taking a 5K desktop at 200% scaling and downscaling it to 4K, You can just run it at 4K 150% and it'll be the same exact UI size. The benefits are twofold. Firstly, it's only running at 4K internally. You won't lose any performance by scaling this way. Secondly, it looks sharper because there's no artifacting or blurriness from the downscaling. So, how much of a difference actually is it? Well, let's take a look. Here, you can notice some artifacting around text and a bit of blurriness, whereas Windows is completely absent of this. But overall, they really don't look that much different. Both of them have a similar level of sharpness to the text. That's just because they're both running at the same scale, or the same simulated scale in macOS's case, at the same resolution. If we take a look at this image, there's essentially no difference at all. I will leave you to be a judge on whether any of this is a big deal. I use Windows and macOS, and I really don't notice much, but your mileage may vary. So yeah, I know it's been a large gap between videos. That first video, I did not expect anyone to watch it other than like my friends and family and like a handful of other people. Seriously. When I released it, I was just starting my semester. I tried to get this video out during my semester, but work just kept piling up. I wasn't able to get it done, so I'm very sorry for the gap. I don't know how well this video will do. It's a part 2 on an already niche topic, but I found it interesting, and if you got this far, I guess you found it interesting too. So yeah, thank you for watching.